probably know me anyway. I'm Ted Perkins, the founder and CEO of Recovery Movie Meetups. If you don't know about Recovery Movie Meetups, we're a mutual support program that uses movies about addiction, recovery, mental health as springboards to start, rich and emotionally grounded and transformative conversations in group settings. So we're all over the country and in Canada and growing in the UK and a couple of other areas. We even have outposts in Singapore and Vietnam and treatment facilities, Hawaii, et cetera. So we're growing quickly, and it's been a wonderful way to use movies. And I've seen in my own recovery, I use movies to get better. And now it's wonderful to be able to use that with others. I wanted to I have a 12-year-old daughter, so I'm actually a stakeholder in the whole conversation about youth behavioral health. And I see the effect that media has on her. And to be frank, I mean, most kids, most people, especially today, their perception of their personhood, their reality, who they are and their perception of the world is so influenced by media. I mean, there's what they see and there's who they speak to and what they learn out of books, et cetera. But so much of it is derived from screens. And so what's coming off that screen is really, really very important. And to give you an example, I mean, in looking at media, there's propensity to sort of perhaps be alarmist that, like, the images on TV, like that funny scene from South Park, let's blame Canada. Is it the images on TV? No, it's let's blame Canada. It's the fact that there's a lot of different factors that go into person's behavior and their view of the world. But Hollywood and the media generally do have a very responsible role to play, and they haven't always played it perfectly. But that always depends on context, setting, and what the aims of the producers was. So, for instance, I want to show you just a little bit of show and tell, because I'm all about, our whole program is about showing instead of telling. So this is I'm going to share this on. This is just a segment from the new trailer of Supergirl. And you'll notice something kind of interesting about it. A beer bottle floating in zero gravity. And then you can see that she's at some bar and she's blowing out a flaming shot. Now, on the surface, that would, I'm sure that there's like some sort of a group somewhere of enraged mothers who are saying, that's really not the right message to be sending to young girls today. And that might be totally true on one level, but also on the bigger picture, the story of Supergirl is a story about a girl who lost her entire family, the destruction of her planet, and is using alcohol and a party lifestyle to cope with trauma. So there's a deeper message. There's something much more going on in this movie, on top of just flying around with a cape and destroying the aliens, etc. And the same thing goes for the TV series Euphoria. Like, on one level, it shows a very glamorized, very stylized look at drug use and risky behavior, etc. But the showrunner's actually been very frank in saying that, like, one of his biggest motives is to show the consequences, and a lot of the show is about the actual consequences of this. And so generally, media does have a great role to play, but also it has a role to play in several different aspects. We're not just, Claudia and other people will probably will tell you, it's not just about addiction and mental health, although those are still very important. But we've got a whole new bag of tricks. We're dealing with, like, internet addiction, screen addiction, gambling addiction, which has now become a huge problem, online betting addiction, anxiety around AI. Young people today are dealing with tremendous existential crises having to do with the fact that they're not sure if they're going to have a job when they get out of college, and they have to start paying back their student debt. They're not sure that there's a role for them in society, in the work culture, which, in an extreme case in China, you may have heard about the sit-down culture, which is a group of people who are saying, I don't want to play this rat race. I can't get a job. I can't afford anything. They live with their parents, and they have decided to have a minimalistic lifestyle, do nothing, strive for nothing, and dream about nothing, which is rather nihilistic. But those are the reactions that some people are having to this sort of these problems that are happening today. So I think media has a very powerful role to play in how we shape those narratives and how media can inform it and help and inspire other people. And so I want to get some people together who are not necessarily media experts, although Aaron and Ted are, but people like Claudia Black, who's worked with teens and young adults and is very acutely aware of the struggles and the possibilities and opportunities that teens and young people have. So if you don't know Claudia, she's the clinical architect of the Claudia Black Center of the Meadows in Phoenix. She's the author of numerous publications and is really sort of like the go-to person when it comes to teen mental health, especially as it is related to trauma and trauma-informed recovery. So, Claudia, I'd love to pass it over to you to hear your thoughts on the matter. And we don't have that many people, so we're not going to have that long of a question and answer. But tell us what you think, and feel free to go on as long as you like, but keep it to 15 minutes or 10 minutes.
I'll do that. I'll do that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ted. And it's nice to meet those of you I had a chance to meet just before we started here. I've been working in the field of addictive disorders for over 45 years now. But in the last 10 years, I've focused predominantly, almost solely on young people. And I oversee a young adult program, psychiatrically licensed. Predominantly, we work with addictions and various mental health issues. And those are young people between 18 and 28 years of age. Now, these are young people who are in such a crisis. Their crisis has necessitated the need for inpatient treatment. The reality is the majority of young people will not ever need it. And I think that what we want to do is really be a resource to help young people not ever get to that kind of point. And I think what we fail to see, I think sometimes in our society, is that we fail to see that while these young adults are oftentimes offer the privileges of somebody who's an adult, and those privileges begin at 16, 18, and 21, they don't move necessarily from adolescence to maturity, just because, as I say, they're afforded these kinds of opportunities. And what we know in terms of neuroscience today is, that developing brain is doing just that, is still developing until they're easily 24, 25, 26, 7 years of age. And what that means is these are people who are still have the potential to be very reactive. They have the potential to be still very impulsive. They are very much influenced by other people. That what we call that executive function of the brain isn't fully developed yet. So they're not thinking through necessarily consequences as readily as somebody else who does reach that level of maturity. Now, there's a phrase for the stage that they're in, and that's called the emerging young adult phase. And what's significant to this phase is this is obviously at a time in one's life where historically young people have begun to move out of the home. Today, that's not happening near as much in our country as it once did, just because of the severe economic divide. They don't have the resources to so readily, nor do the family have the resources to support them readily moving out of the home. But it's still a part of this developmental stage where I'm thinking about, am I going to be able to move out? And when can I do that? And how is that going to be possible? Do I have to join the military to get housing? Is there housing at a school that I might go to? Do I need to share an apartment? Because we're finding that even 25 to 35-year-olds are having a hard time even purchasing a house, let alone renting a house, let alone purchasing a house. But this is also that time that they're not just physically moving away from their parents. They're really trying to develop a far greater sense of independence and autonomy from their parents. They're trying to make decisions for themselves. So you see them making decisions about jobs, because that affects the ability to even move out or to have some of the things that they're hoping for. But they're making decisions about, do I have a career potential? What would that look like? What do I think that might be? Do I go to school for that? Is it a 4-year school? Is it a trade school? Is the military something that would be helpful to me? So a phase where they're seeking a lot more independence, but with far less supervision, is what would be the norm of this phase. The other significant part of this phase is that they're figuring out where it is they fit socially in the world. And while they're busy doing that, as they're at this stage of life, they're probably, should they be getting out of the house at all, they're going to be exposed to more alcohol and drugs than they probably have ever been exposed to before. And they're having to navigate that world and where they fit into that world. They're making decisions about their sexual behavior And again, they're probably even exposed to more sexual behaviors than they previously have been. They're navigating relationships more seriously for the first time in their life. This sense of identity, again, is still being formed, is still in that development process, while they are also oftentimes garnering and seriously seeking some autonomy for themselves. But and Ted actually got to this, and I don't know how many of the viewers heard this first, but what's so different about this generation today is that they grew up as what we call screen and digital natives. And while there's a lot of good that can happen through the use of screen, what's true about this generation is the way in which they communicate and the way they spend their leisure time has fundamentally changed in the last 20 years in ways it has never previously changed before. Now, as a consequence of spending not just 2 or 3 hours a day on screens, but anywhere usually from 6 to 12 hours a day on screens. And then you combine that with the fact that one more thing that they have experienced that never before has a generation experienced, at least in almost 125 years, and that is they experienced the pandemic of COVID. And as a consequence of the copious amount of time they're spending on the screen, and the isolation that came with COVID, and then the pervasive fear that came with death, that came in the early parts of COVID in particular, we see kids who are lacking some very basic social skills. And we're seeing kids today who have difficulty making eye contact in conversation with others. And we see kids who their only friends that they can identify are people they've never even met in real time. And we're seeing kids who we often think of them as they've lived a screen-based childhood instead of a play-based childhood because they've not been out in that natural world of play. And we need to think about developmentally what that provides. What they've been missing out on is in so-called play that they learn how to problem solve. They learn how to negotiate. They learn how to resolve conflict. They learn how to share fun times with other people that can help them develop a sense of attachment or closeness. And so what I'm really saying here is they're missing out on major developmental, absolutely essential experiences. And today, the loneliness, depression, anxiety is absolutely skyrocketing in terms of mental health issues. And it's very much connected to the multiple hours that they are spending involved in some kind of digital screen matter. Now, the other phenomenon that's always been a struggle for teenagers is the bullying that can take place for kids. It often begins in grade school and may continue in through their high school years or not start till then. But as a consequence of the internet today, I mean, bullying has been with us for generations, and mostly it takes place in the school setting. But it used to be that when you left school at 2:30, 3 or 4, the bullying stopped. Now, the trauma, I don't want to imply the trauma stops, but the bullying, the physical act of it stops. And today that's not true as a consequence of cyberbullying. I mean, it's just, I would say 70% of the kids that I work with have been subject to some chronic, serious bullying in their life. And that ultimately evolved to some kind of cyberbullying. And then we have the added phenomena of we have a new style of parenting in this last 20 years, and that is an overprotection in that parents are doing for kids and no longer allowing kids to take various risks and to do their own problem solving. Kids aren't being allowed to think for themselves in so many situations. And as a consequence to a lot of this, they're taking a lot more time to mature, and they're taking a lot more time in which to be independent. Now, then you couple that, sort of this big trifecta impact. Then you couple that with, have they had any developmental trauma in their growing up years? And a lot of these kids have had very serious developmental trauma. Today, and we have a lot of what I call highly impaired dysfunction occurring in family systems. And today, I continue to see a lot of physical abuse, pushing, shoving, kicking, pinching, slamming kids up against the wall till their teeth rattle. I had a young man just today in the group say, and my dad used to tell me, just go kill myself when I would cry about something. You see a lot of sexual abuse that may take place within the family or by somebody outside of the family, but in somebody's growing up years. As these young people are navigating the world of alcohol and drugs, we're seeing a lot of sexual abuse in that context as well. And particularly if I have a female in my program, And if she's showing signs of being addicted to alcohol or drugs, it is almost a given that she has been sexually assaulted, and oftentimes even has no recall, has just woken up to the social texting that demonstrates that that's what happened here. We see a lot of bullying that begins at home with kids, and I can guarantee you, if you were a kid that is bullied at home, you're going to be bullied at school. And today, if you're a kid that's bullied at school, you're going to be bullied on the net. The other phenomenon I see with this age group, and I think it's come since the opiate epidemic, is kids are losing people to death. I have so many kids that I encounter who've lost a friend, who've lost a sibling, who've lost a parent due to an overdose, due to a suicide, due to an accident that's been influenced by the use of alcohol and other drugs. And then there's another family dynamic. I see a lot of kids struggling with severe depression to the point sometimes of suicide, emanating from their need to be so perfect, to meet these unrealistic expectations that they've got from somebody outside of themselves, and it's usually people in that parenting role. And so, when I think about this young person, I have to remember what's happening for them at this stage in their life and what kinds of influences might be different for this age group than previous. And on top of all of that, we've always had dysfunctional families, but today we're paying attention to the fact that that has um, an ongoing risk in terms of their behavior as they move into their adult life. Now, what I've just described are a lot of risk factors, but protection factors actually have more weight than risk factors, and we have the potential to influence both. But I wanted to say that the film we're soon to watch, because I have actually seen it, by the way, this film that we've soon to watch, and the film is provided through Recovery Meetups, their program. They offer a medium for discussion that I think is one of those tools that helps build resilience amongst our kids. So that's all I thought I would share today. I know that other people have some thoughts, and then we're going to see the film shortly.
Thank you, Claudia. I really appreciate it. Um, we also have Pete Nielsen, but he had a scheduling problem. So he was unfortunately unable to join us in person. He's literally on a plane, but I was able to tape his thoughts yesterday. So I'm going to share that video. It's about 10 minutes long. And then we'll go to Ted to tell us about his work at Notre Dame. And then we'll go to Aaron to talk about Sentient and the film that you're going to watch today, and the work they've done, and all the methodical planning that went behind the creation of this actual film. So let me get a share Pete with you.
Well, hello everyone, and I am so happy to be here. And thank you, Recovery Movie Meetups, for having me be here. My name is Pete Nielsen, President and CEO of CCAP and MBHAP, California Consortium of Addiction Programs Professional and National Behavioral Health Association Providers. And it's so important that we talk about, what's happening with youth and, why this is important and why now that we need to talk about, what's happening in our culture, So things have changed. And, I'll tell you, when I used to work with adolescents, the one thing you say or you don't say is, I've been there, because you will lose attention immediately because I'll tell you the response they would have. As soon as somebody would say, "Well, I've been there." Yeah, when was that? When dinosaurs roamed the earth, because if you're trying to get attunement, um, that's not the way to do it. So with attunement, it's, that you get them, they get you, that it's an automatic. So you don't have to say that I've been there if that they under if they know that you understand. And I think that that is a key point in working with youth, is that they feel that you get them, not trying to prove that you have something, or that you meet the street cred, that you're trying to prove something. That's what not to do. And so one of the things that I really realize in working with people in youth as well is that, the importance of somebody getting you and feeling what you feel is incredibly important. Us as human beings, we reach out, we need that. And um, one of the stories that I like to tell, has to do, let's say that somebody, and I'm just going to pick on Ted. Ted came and he had this huge anvil. Anvil is just a huge weight, and he took it and he dropped that anvil on my toe. What you would see from me is a very visceral reaction with that heavy weight. And if you didn't see what the weight looked like, and you didn't see Ted drop it on my toe, you would just see my physical reaction. My fists would clench, my nostrils would flare, my teeth would grin. I would probably say words that would scare sailors. All of these things would you would see all of this stuff. Now, when that happens, you will, as somebody would look at that and say, "Oh, he's out of his mind. He's angry. He may need professional assistance, call security, get law enforcement, all of these things." Because they won't see the anvil that was dropped on my toe. So the reality is you can see an anvil on somebody's toe, but you can't see an anvil on somebody's soul. So the reality is you don't know what's going on with somebody. And, especially with addiction, people assume that when they see behavior, that the behavior is this, and this. So when you're working with adolescents, they think that they don't look at the behavior as connected to a substance use disorder, that they have a brain disease. They look at it as they're just being defiant, or you're not seeing the trauma, you're not seeing the pain, you're not seeing all of that, because the symptoms come out in behavior forms, and we are trained in society to punish behavior. So, and that happens more often with adolescents rather than anything. And so we say something about, when parenting, you need to have compassion and love and everything else. But all of a sudden, when we have behavior that's unacceptable, we get stern, we get, and then all of a sudden that compassion's gone. They need the compassion the most to be able to, and be able to break through what's going on. And so when I worked with adolescents that had behavioral and emotional issues, that many times I would see the behavior before the true individual showed up, because they knew if I accepted them as them, and that I had compassion and understanding for them, then the real them would show up, and then we would come in and say hello. And so, we see this portrayed in many movies. If you look at a lot of these teen angst movies and stuff like that, and you see with the behavior, the trouble, and then you see that somebody has understanding and somebody has compassion, and you see, that people then, come around. I think one of the movies, and it's not necessarily having to do with adolescence, but Good Will Hunting is a movie that brings to mind, as far as somebody having understanding that really breaks through to somebody. There's lots of movies that are like that, and I think that the fact that we have media to be able to relate to people can be a very good thing. Now, when we look at social media and some of the things, yeah, there's another side to that it can produce anxiety. It can produce a lot of issues that we have. And recently, I was in a conversation the other day about some of the pros and cons to some of the culture we're seeing with some of the younger generation, is that we're seeing a downtick in people actually drinking, and that's socially acceptable, and that people are not doing as much externally. People are not, even in a lot of the other things, people are not doing that behavior. They're not. The problem is they're not socializing. So something that used to socialize when they used to go and they used to do parties, now they're doing it in secret by themselves, and maybe and then there's the comparison of social media. Somebody's insides doesn't match somebody's outsides, and so this really creates a lot of anxiety and pressure upon an individual, and that you can't have your true self, your true authentic self can't show up. That's, if anything that we see in social media today, is that there's a lot of comparison and the true self can't show up. And if you're not socializing with anybody in your peer group in person, does anybody truly know the true you? And then you feel this disconnect, and this disconnect with people and society, and you see that people are then isolating and hibernating, and that there's no real connection. There's an online connection, and when something happens online, it decimates them. I had a um, a discussion the other day with a colleague, and he was talking about his daughter getting into school, and she was deathly afraid of when she posted what when she was accepted. She didn't know if she wanted to go to that school, but if she didn't post early, then they knew that didn't have an early acceptance. But she didn't want to post that because that might not be the option that she wanted, and she really wanted this other school. But then she didn't want them to know, and you could just see the wheels, turning on how, and that's what's happening. I mean, that's just a description of what's happening in social media with our youth. They're really having, that this true conflict of, well, how will others perceive me? And it used to be in a time without cameras and social media and everything else, that people would have short memories of what had happened. It didn't live on forever. And with media and the things that you do, it now lives on for a long time in people's memories, and it now has a place where it didn't have a place. Nobody caught you on camera, so it really didn't matter what you did. Now, you have, and then people are devastated when somebody makes a comment online. And people, you have cyberbullying and all those things. It's very real. And the hardest thing, I think, that between the generational gaps is the people that didn't grow up, that are, the social media immigrants versus social media natives, is it doesn't have an impact on their psyche because they already fully are developed in who they are. And if you've had somebody that's developed who they are online, and they match that with who they are as a person, that has, so when something happens online, it truly rocks their inner core. It's not something that somebody just to show, you don't like it, I don't really care, unfriend them, goodbye, moving on, So I think it's something that we need to really look at, and how that affects youth today, and how it affects people in general. And I really, like the opportunity that we can talk about this, and then we can take a look at what influence that, media, social media, and that has an impact in the good stuff that it does. I mean, Ted knows that I talk a lot about movies as describing things. I, watch different movies, and I see, and I put a lot of correlation between, movies, and it's a way to relate to people, in a way. I always would compare, um, you know, uh, substance use disorder, and when people, stop using substances, to the movie The Matrix. I know it's an older movie, but and how people didn't think that they could do things, and now they're in the real world, and once they understand, that the spoon isn't real, then they're able to redefine their destiny and who they are, and that it's not the same, as they realize that substances are not in control of them. They are a master commander of their own life. It changes and rewrites their narrative. So, anyways, thank you for having me. Thank you for the wonderful work that you do, and have an amazing day. Bye, everybody.
Thank you, Pete Nielsen. We're wishing him a happy trip. He's on a plane right now. Now let's go to just an amazing person who does just really cool work. I think this is just one of the one of the greater college courses that I wish that they'd had. Ted Mandel is a professor at Notre Dame University. Has been teaching for 38 years, and he has a popular course called "Drunk on Film: The Psychology of Storytelling with Alcohol and Its Effects on Alcohol Consumption," which apparently is a very popular course. Ted, tell us about it, and tell us how you've actually actively used media specifically films about alcohol, to convey lessons to your students and what the results have been. I'll pass it
Well,
over
thanks.
to you.
Thanks, Ted. I appreciate it. I've got something I'll share in a minute, some slides to kind of show people a little bit like how the course works. But I just kind of want to echo what Claudia and Pete said. The things that they talk about are the things that I see in class every day. I've taught the course 18 times over 6 years to almost 2,000 students. I co-teach the course with a psychology professor, so we look at the psychology, both neuroscience and social psychology behind the representation of alcohol, and we basically look at alcohol in the college setting and ask students why they drink the way they do, if they do, and what is their belief system about alcohol, and how media has actually created that belief system, which is pretty much false. So what they believe alcohol can give them is not really true. And we kind of break down the storytelling elements behind it, how stories are constructed, and how the story of alcohol has been presented to them ever since they were 3 years old in the back of a van watching a Disney film on a DVD. And what they find out is like, oh, wait a minute, this drinking culture that is really bad in colleges, by the way, binge drinking is probably it is worse in college than it is outside of students who are actually not in college. So I kind of wanted to show you a little bit, just give you a little taste of the course to show you how we deconstruct media. And in many ways, we look at media that many of the films have nothing to do with addiction. Some of the films at the second half of the course do. So it's kind of like I explained that the course is kind of like a Christmas carol. This is where you were, this is where you are, and this is where you're headed if you continue to drink the way you are in college. And most students in college will say having an alcohol use disorder is not even on their plate. They never even thought about it. It's so normalized. So I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to zip through this in under 10 minutes. Okay,
Yes.
so this is the course, Drunk on Film. It was featured, like Ted mentioned, on the PBS NewsHour. At the end of this segment on the PBS NewsHour, they showed a statistic that said around 15% of full-time college students meet the criteria for alcohol use disorder. At the University of Notre Dame, that's 1,800 students. And I would say 1,795 of them would not say they have an alcohol use disorder. And fortunately, probably 5 or 6 of them recognize it, have been in recovery. I have students who have been out of recovery and taken the class, which is fabulous. But in general, most students in college think it's normal. At the start of semester, we take a survey and we ask students, when was the first time you became drunk? And what we find is that essentially 3 out of 4 students almost were drunk before they even got to college. And that really got me wondering, like, where are they getting these messages about alcohol before they even get to college? And a lot of it is in high school, and even before high school, students are actually drinking early. So we start to look at the films that they're watching when they're in junior high. Films like The Kissing Booth, which I'll get to in a minute, films that kind of promote binge drinking amongst youth with no consequences. And we kind of look at those films and ask them if they watched them, and then and ask them, do you remember these scenes? And surprisingly, a lot of these students don't even remember alcohol being a part of the scenes, but of the films, but subconsciously it registers with them, and it creates this narrative of alcohol that they believe that it's necessary for so many things, especially socially. We look at documentaries, we look at social media, we look at advertising. We do a lot of TED Talks on storytelling, on vulnerability, on the psychology and social psychology aspects of it, the neuroscience. So let me just show you one really quick theme amongst the probably about 8 or 9 of them that we talk about during the semester. This is like a theme at the beginning of the idea of love and belonging, that the humans have a need to be loved, liked, and belong, and how the alcohol industry and how alcohol is presented in media to kind of exploit that. So for instance, this is a 30-second ad by Jim Beam And you can see how alcohol is attached to social connections. So the idea of people are good for you. And you have this female who's kind of like the sober outsider who walks into the bar, and now she becomes, the idea is, of course, she's going to be part of this community, and they associate bourbon with social connection. Of course, nobody actually drinks alcohol in television commercials. Nobody consumes the alcohol. But for kids growing up, they do drink alcohol in Disney films. And if there's been a lot of research on Disney films, so even when kids were younger, there's been a lot of alcohol exposure by watching the films that we would consider kids' films or films, for children. And in most of the instances of these animated films, alcohol is accepted, and most of the times it's accepted to make people laugh. Drunkenness is seen as funny, and children associate drunkenness with comedy in many ways, and very rarely is it ever rejected. I think only the Pinocchio was the only Disney film that they found that actually rejected alcohol use. So if you look at a film like Tangled, which is here's a 30-second scene from that, you can see how alcohol, again, is associated with community.
An island that I own, tending, rested, and alone, surrounded by enormous piles of money.
I've got a dream.
She's got a dream.
I've got a dream.
She's got a dream.
I just want to see the floating lanterns gleam. And with every passing hour, I'm so glad I left my tower. Like all you lovely folks, I've got a dream.
She's got a dream. He's got a dream. They've got a dream. We've got a dream. So our differences ain't really that extreme. We're one big team. Call us brutal, sadistic, and grotesquely optimistic. 'Cause way down deep inside we've got a dream. I've 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 got a dream. Yes, way down deep inside I've got a dream.
Okay, so we have steins of essentially beer. It's a very similar scene that we just saw in the Jim Beam commercial. When we asked students to actually write about these films and what they remember about the films, and this one student talks about the fact that she never actually was allowed to watch television, but she did have DVDs, and she watched Tangled when she was in first grade. And because of and she describes the scene you just watched, and then she says, because this was my first exposure to a bar setting and drunk behavior, I thought that it must be normal to celebrate with alcohol and to be drunk. And they never even think about the fact that this has subconsciously been a part of the narratives that they've been watching in films as they've been growing up. The most watched film on Netflix in 2018 was The Kissing Booth. I hope you haven't seen it because it's a god-awful film, but it's an extremely successful film, and it spawned 2 other sequels, and it was the coming out party for Jacob Elordi. Most of my current students were in middle school, and this is a film that we use as kind of as a way of deconstructing. So I'll show you how we deconstruct. So I'm going to show you again a 90-second clip from this film, and then show you how we deconstruct it for students to give them kind of an aha moment.
When you mess with me.
You're holding it completely wrong. If you just...
Warren, can you just play the game? You know how to hold a controller, Warren. Oh, yes, come on, guys.
Boring.
So what you just saw there is Elle Evans, who's the sober junior in high school, goes to a party is offered shots, says she doesn't drink, but then decides she's going to go ahead and drink, and then gets blackout drunk, blacks out, and is picked up. I didn't show you the end of it. Is picked up by her crush, Jacob Elordi, taken away. He puts her down in his bedroom, and then wakes up the next morning and nothing's happened to her. And it's the beginning of a relationship. One of my students, again, we asked students, and one of the students said they had previously watched Kissing Booth when it first came out when they were 14. And as a young woman watching the movie, as much as I don't want to admit it, I found myself believing that this was a semi-accurate portrayal of high school relationships and parties. I now realize that this movie portrays an inaccurate representation, promotes an inaccurate representation of drinking, and negatively portrays young women when drinking. If you notice the three things that I just showed you, they're tavern, the bar, and the party, the high school party. It's all this the sober woman who walks in, or the singled out woman amongst a whole bunch of men. And that we do talk about gender representation, objectification of women, that is apparent in many of these kind of teen rom-coms, and the association with alcohol. Quickly, 7 themes that we will talk about in that particular film is the idea of the sober female outsider, the normalization of binge drinking. Characters drink to get drunk. They're not just drinking. Alcohol is not just a side note there. It's actually used to advance the narrative. The idea that when they drink, it turns into a music video, like you just watched, and we have no sense of how much they drank over how much period of time. So what impression does that give to youth as far as like what alcohol, how to consume alcohol? The idea that if you hold a red cup in your hand, and many of these films, almost all of them now, they have teens in them, there are red cups that are in the background, and the red cup represents belonging. If you're holding a red cup, you're part of the social connection. If you're not holding a red cup, you're an outsider. Essentially, if you're drinking, you're part of the group. If you're not, you're not. In many cases, only the protagonist is intoxicated, which is really strange. One person gets completely blackout drunk. Everybody else there is sober. There's a tight connection between alcohol and romance, alcohol and intimacy, and alcohol and sex, and the idea of the sober night. The male character who is sober in these scenes, who somehow saves the female character who drank too much. It is an extremely dangerous narrative to be pushing when the films themselves are targeted at pretty much 12-year, 13-year-old girls. At the end of the semester, 90% of our students say they changed the way alcohol affects them and others. The other 10% were non-drinkers when we started, so I think we got 100% out of it. And then we took a survey last year of students who were still in university, Notre Dame, had taken the course, and this is the main takeaway. 44% of them said that before they took the course, they drank more than 5 drinks when they went out. That dropped down to 21% after taking the course, which is pretty significant. Even more so amongst women, it was 34.4% of the students drank more than 5 drinks. Women, they didn't even consider that binge drinking at the time. That dropped down to 9%. So we dropped out about 75%, which we're really proud of. But it makes a huge difference. And the takeaway that I always get is like I teach this class because I can't not teach the class, because you get emails like this. This class truly changed the way I look at alcohol, my relationships, and myself, and is one of the few classes at Notre Dame that's made a noticeable impact on me. I feel emotional writing this email of appreciation because this class has changed my life so much over the course of the semester, and will certainly impact the rest of my life for the better. It's an odd way to put it, but if I had a child, I'd want them to take the class because it's been more effective and eye-opening than any health or alcohol EDU class ever was. Thank you for everything. The class truly makes a difference. The class is really to kind of awaken students who are in the midst of building addictions, essentially. If they don't know it already, they're on the path. And we try to change that here. So that's my spiel on Drunk on Film.
Yeah, that's terrific. And having those results to share with us, I think it's just tremendous. Thank you so much for being part of this.
Mhm.
Yeah, I wish I had been able to take your course when I was younger. It would have probably had a measurable change in my behavior as well. Now let's go to Aaron Plant, who's the co-founder and vice president of Sentient Research. He specializes in what we're going to actually see here today is education, entertainment content. He's designed and evaluated effective innovations for clients, including the CDC, the NIH, the HHS, and has published over 30 articles. So I believe this gentleman knows what he's talking about, and he's put all of that information, all that background into a way to create content that's compelling and could do what has been done in Ted's class, a way to transform somebody's view of themselves, their behavior, and ultimately who they end up being as a result. So that's all very powerful stuff. And he has a lot of research and some other past experience with other content that has validated their approach and Sentient Research's approach to creating this content. So we're very happy to have Sentient as a co-presenter and Aaron specifically to present his film, which is queued up. So Aaron, I'll turn it over to you, and then we'll watch the movie.
All right, thank you, Ted. Hi, everybody. So like Ted said, my name is Aaron Plant. I'm the vice president and co-founder of Sentient Research, and I'm going to talk about a little bit of different type of entertainment education. So entertainment education, there's lots of different types. So there's videos and TV shows. That's what we do. There's an entertainment education that's embedded into entertainment, which is more along the lines of what Ted does and how he uses entertainment education. And then there's lots of other media forms like comics and plays and things like that. But at Sentient Research, we specialize in entertainment education videos, either short form that are less than 30-minute, like sort of like one episode TV shows that sometimes have commercials that we also make as well, or a full-on telenovela. So I'm going to talk a little bit about both of those different types of things. And I'm going to try to speed through these so we don't have too much time. So I'm going to skip my outline. So just a little bit about Sentient Research. So we're a consulting firm headquartered in Los Angeles County. We only do pro-social work in public health, public policy, and education. We work all across the US and Latin America. And we do specialize in qualitative and quantitative research studies, program evaluation, and developing programs, specifically social marketing, technology programs like apps and websites, and entertainment education programs. So I'm going to define entertainment education, even though we all kind of know what it is. But the way that we like to think about entertainment education is it's a program strategy that improves knowledge, awareness, norms, and most importantly, behaviors for health and social issues by embedding messages and storytelling narratives where relatable characters model behavior and experience various consequences. So many studies have demonstrated the impact of entertainment education on a really wide range of health and social issues. But I think that entertainment education programs are sometimes mistaken for like, oh, it's a PSA or an after-school special or an informational video. But the types of programs that we develop are really developed with a very strict methodology that takes usually years, at least a year, hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars to produce, and multiple players. And they're based on entertainment education theories and behavior change theories. They're developed with human-centered design, with really co-developed with the end users, with the intended audience, with really extensive formative research, production values that are the same as a TV show. So that's the sort of what we do. And the reason why we do that is the research shows that when you put that sort of upfront effort into developing your program, it's much more likely to be effective. And because the programs are so expensive to create, you only have one shot to get it right. We always take a lot of time to make sure that we're doing all the upfront research that, through the iterative process that we work with youth, with the production company, with stakeholders, subject matter experts. At the end of the day, we have something that's very likely to work. And at the very least, everyone is going to love. So some of the benefits of entertainment education programs are as I said, they're really effective. They're also really engaging to participants because we work in the public health world where there's so many different types of programs. Lots of times the programs are 10 in-person, 1-hour workshops or virtual workshops. Our programs often are less than 30 minutes. And instead of something that people have to do, it's something that they really want to do because it's like watching a TV show that's fun. The most common feedback we hear about all of our projects is like, what's the next episode? Like, I want to know what happens next with these characters. Like I said, they can be really brief compared to other interventions. Most of the entertainment education interventions we develop are 25-ish minutes. We also have a 47 episode telenovela I'm going to tell you a little bit about, but they can be very brief. They're low burden on staff, so programs that want to implement them, they don't have to get any training. They're fast to implement, so it's better for organizations, and also low burden on participants because they're so short. They can be implemented in a really wide range of settings and in lots of different ways. So they can be implemented in person. They can be implemented virtually with a link. They can be implemented in groups, individually, in schools, substance use treatment centers, after-school programs, clinics, waiting rooms, all types of places. Sometimes television. And they're easy to disseminate and scale. So I said that they're expensive to produce, at least the ones that we create are. But once you produce them, are extremely cost effective to get out into the world and disseminate. And all the programs that we develop are national scale programs that get implemented in by hundreds of organizations across the country for, at least a decade or more it's pretty much the life span of one of these projects. This is just an overview of how we develop the programs, which I kind of talked about. I'm going to speed through this. I think two of the most important things is that we always use human-centered design. So we're really co-developing the intervention with the end users, with the target audience, and with the people who are ultimately going to implement the program. So that's staff from organizations. And we really carefully choose the development team, the people that actually are going to write, because we're not writers, really. We're not the script writer, and we're not the production company, but we choose those actors, those players very carefully, because we essentially co-write the script with the writer, and we co-direct the film with the director. So we have to find people that enjoy that process and are willing to do that, because not everybody is willing to be as collaborative. But that part is also very important to the process, because writers and production companies don't understand entertainment education. They don't understand the theories, and they just don't understand the way it has to work, and it has to work in a very specific way. All right, I'm going to talk really briefly about some of our programs. So one of the programs that sort of is a predecessor to Party Foul, which you'll watch, is called Plan A. This program was funded by U.S. Department of Health and Human Services as a 23-minute video intervention that we designed to reduce unintended pregnancies and STIs among young women. This program was evaluated by another firm in a federally funded 5-year, $5 million randomized control trial with over 1,700 young women, and where there's a control group and they watched a video about smoking. And Plan A viewers had significant sustained improvements in risk perception, contraceptive knowledge, HIV STI testing, and condom use. And those were sustained after either 3 months, or in the condom use case was sustained 9 months after watching a 23-minute video. And also there was increases in patient-provider communication immediately after watching the video. And that video intervention is on a list of effective interventions for teen pregnancy prevention from HHS, or it was until the new administration got rid of the list. But there are really only a small handful of interventions on that list, and Plan A is by far the shortest intervention and probably the most popular intervention on that list, because it's so easy to implement and because young women just really love it. The other program I want to talk about is our telenovela that I talked about. This one, Jorge Montoya, who's on the call, it's really his program that he managed, but I'm going to talk about it. It's called Vencer el Miedo. It was an entertainment education telenovela that we developed in partnership with Televisa in Mexico to improve parent-child communication around sex and to reduce unintended adolescent pregnancies. There were 47 episodes produced. They aired on primetime TV in 2020 with about 4 million viewers every night for 47 episodes. And it also aired in every Latin American country and in the US on Spanish language TV, with another 10 million people who watched the show. And we only had funding to evaluate the program in Mexico, but we found increased parent-child communication and contraceptive use, including dual contraception, which is contraception plus condoms, among viewers compared to non-viewers, which is huge. And this is a country-wide program. So really, we're talking about country scale improvements in sexual risk behaviors. All right, so Party Foul, which is what we're about to watch, is sort of based on the model that we developed for Plan A and a previous program that I didn't talk about as well. Both of those are considered effective interventions, and we based Party Foul on that model that we developed. So it's also funded by HHS, 24-minute entertainment education video. This one's designed to reduce heavy and binge drinking and to promote harm reduction and bystander behaviors among youth. We use human-centered design, and we work with college-age youth all across the U.S. and university staff, people that implement programs with youth around substance use, specifically alcohol. And we were lucky enough to have the showrunner of East Los High, which was a hit TV show on Hulu that also used entertainment education. He wrote the script for us. And we designed the program to be implemented in various ways, just like all of our programs. But this one specifically, we're building an e-learning platform to deliver the program at colleges and universities, and orientation and induction. It could be implemented in groups. We have developed a discussion guide and an implementation guide for organizations to implement it in groups. And also our staff can also implement the program ourselves, either virtually or in person. And with the group level, and organizations can also implement virtually or in person, depending on what their needs are. I don't know if you want to, Ted, wait to ask questions at the end, or if you want to, if I should answer questions now.
Yeah, let's do that. And also let's reiterate, as Aaron said, this short film is available to anybody, treatment facilities or anybody else who would like to program it and acquire a performance license. So Aaron, why don't you drop your information into the chat, and so anybody who wants to can follow up with you, and also you can also follow up with me over here at Recovery Movie Meetups. But I'll put my email. But you should definitely get in touch with Aaron.